You're listening to the Inside Podcast Network, podcasts for the enterprise. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of a brand new show. This is Inside System Center, a spin-off from the long-running, now defunct Inside Central. We thought, given that we've spun off inside the Microsoft Cloud, which is our cloud-focused vidcast, I guess we'll go with these days, netcast. I like Leo Laporte's netcast rather than vidcast. So given that we've got a cloud-focused netcast, we thought we'd better do an on-prem one as well, hence Inside System Center. Joining me, as he has for the last 3 years and has largely carried this show or this network on his very broad shoulders, is Mr. Pete Zerga. Hey, Pete.
Hey, Dan. How are we doing?
Good, mate. This is, dare I say it, and I know you're too polite to say anything, Pete, but this is take two. The first take was didn't go so well. Technical issues, but we'll see how we go this time.
Well, so netcast and love are better the second time around. Is that how that saying goes? I don't remember.
That's, I must admit, the first time I heard that was with you and Lee at Ignite. I had to tweet that out because I thought it was excellent. Conferences and love are better the second time around.
Indeed. So what shall we talk about in our first episode of this brand new netcast?
I think it makes sense, given some of the announcements at Ignite around System Center, that we perhaps cover off some of those announcements, and I guess the main one being System Center 2016, and to some extent impacting that it was the announcement of OMS. But I think perhaps if we talk about System Center 2016 initially, and what we can expect from that, is it? I think it's available for download now. Is that correct?
Right, yeah. So they announced availability of System Center 2016. So the first thing that was mentioned, or one of the first things that was mentioned around 2016, is you're going to see a couple of drops.
Right.
One drop, at least with Config Manager to enable Windows 10 support. Mm-hmm. But since the server operating system is not releasing at the same cadence as the desktop, we're going to see another drop around the end of the year for the server OS.
Yep. Well, given the announcement of a release date for Windows 10 of July 29th, I think it was.
That's correct.
We can expect to see a drop of Config Manager sometime within the next month and a half, I would imagine.
Yeah. It seems we would need it pretty right around that date or shortly thereafter to support rollout corporately. So
actually on that, and a question without notice, can we expect to have a drop of Config Manager or an update to the Windows admin, the WAIK or whatever it's called these days?
That's a good question. I don't know what bits they're going to have to work in there, but yeah, I presume we're going to have to see some update to the to the deployment elements of Config Manager by and large. Yep. First and foremost.
Anyway,
and then for the other 2016 components, it'll be a little bit easier. Yep. Well, for the other System Center components, it's for Ops Manager. You can just roll out a management pack, and honestly, a monitoring pack for a client OS doesn't tend to be a high demand area. So
it does not.
And so 2016 didn't feel like a full announcement. This was that initial release preview where they're telling us we're releasing to get the bits out that are ready to and to support Windows 10.
Yep.
Which all makes good sense. I think the other big announcement was the one that really rocked everything and sort of started all of the buzz spinning about the future of System Center.
Your camera's gone all blurry, mate, by the way. See if you can get it back into focus.
Yeah. Wow, look at that. That's really strange.
It is.
I've never seen that happen before in all of our...
Sorry, folks. A little interlude. Blurry Pete.
And not an interlude of the romantic type.
There we go.
Interesting, okay.
There we go.
Yeah, so where was I? We were talking about the announcement that really set the place abuzz,
Yes.
and that was the Microsoft Operations Management Suite.
Yes.
So first off,
What is OMS?
Microsoft Operations Management Suite. I was waiting for MOM to be our acronym, and so I was disappointed for a moment. So OMS was the acronym. So yeah, what is OMS? Right, was the big question. And so they put up a slide in more than one session that showed OMS in the middle and showed Azure on one side and Hyper-V and then our hypervisors on-prem and Amazon on the other side. And they said this is going to be your single control plane regardless of where you're running. You're on-prem,
have you got that slide, by the way? Or?
Actually, I'll pull that up and get it. I'll queue it up sometime in the episode here. Now that you mentioned that would be a good slide to show, wouldn't it?
It would.
But so that was the first thing I heard was single control plane, and then they mentioned Azure Stack. So it sounds like I'm drifting off here, but I'm not actually, because this is all going to influence System Center in some way, shape, or form, whether Microsoft's really said it out loud or not, because it's System Center is about enabling certain capabilities, and so the announcements of System Center 2016, along with the Operations Management Suite, along with Azure Stack, showed us that there are going to be some changes in System Center. So what we saw with that Operations Management Suite slide was the single control plane, and with Azure Stack, we saw they mentioned that the same bits, so to speak, that we have in Azure for deployment, that being the new Azure Resource Manager, template-based deployment capability, which is tied to Azure IaaS v2 networking. The logical networking changes substantially for the better. There's a lot going on there, but that Azure Resource Manager deployment capability, which gives us a JSON template capability, we're going to see that same capability in the on-prem Azure Stack, is what we heard. So Christian Nies, a good, great Swedish MVP, has done a little bit of blogging around Azure Stack. So we'll throw that into the show notes. So if you want to go read a little bit more about Azure Stack, that's absolutely worth doing. But what we're going to see is greater consistency. If not absolute consistency. I think absolute consistency is an unreasonable expectation, but we're going to see a single control plane and a like deployment methodology across on-prem and Azure, which is fantastic. And that Azure Resource Manager template-based capability takes us from an imperative deployment model to a declarative deployment model, and when we go to a declarative model, it means we can define dependencies and control what must happen, in step A before we go to step B. But some of the irritations of Azure IaaS v1, like deploying only one virtual machine into a cloud service at a time, that evaporates because we don't have cloud services anymore, frankly.
Right.
But there's also built-in desired state configuration support. There's also custom script support. So I can deploy an entire environment. So if I wanted to deploy Active Directory plus System Center and backend that with a SQL Always On Availability group, with this new template-based capability that we're going to see coming down the pipe, we can do that. Now, you can already play with that, to be clear, with Azure Resource Manager. If you want to play with that today, that's baked, and you can play with that. So in the show notes, I'm going to point our viewers over to a couple of articles and a library with a massive number of these templates. So you're going to need to watch a video to understand some of those changing capabilities, and you'll absorb that in Azure Resource Manager in the new portal and with these JSON templates today.
Yep.
And then you'll kind of absorb that with the on-prem Azure Stack. I think they said late summer we're going to see that release. It's coming later. I'll nail down the date while we're talking here. But point being, OMS is going to be our single control plane. What do we call that today? We call that VMM.
We do.
So it seems to me that, and we didn't hear much about VMM. So we didn't hear much about a lot of things, right? We heard that Config Manager's getting a release here, largely to support Windows 10.
Yep.
We saw a handful of announcements around Operations Manager. Let me quickly tell you about all of the announcements related to Service Manager.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm done.
Yep.
Certainly we're going to see more trickling out about 2016 as they reach, something closer to feature complete.
And it's probably worth pointing out that whilst I know you were being somewhat tongue-in-cheek with your let me tell you all about Service Manager, but Microsoft did make a commitment to Service Manager last year.
Yeah.
Early last year. So, we are going sort of 14, 15, maybe 16 months ago. But I think that commitment is still certainly there. And we can expect to see some announcements around some of the other System Center products that were perhaps lacking in anything solid out of Ignite. We can expect to see something on those.
Yeah. But to drill down on that Azure Stack, what was promised, as I understood it, as it was explained to me, is that we'll be able to use an Azure Gallery template, a JSON template, and we'll be able to deploy that to Microsoft Azure, or deploy that template to Microsoft Azure Stack. So they said the same bits on-prem as in Azure. So we should see. If what I understood holds true, we should see one deployment methodology, one template-based methodology that crosses both of those. So when we compare that to what we have with Azure Pack today, through the VM Cloud Resource Provider, there you've got everything you need to deliver.
Yeah.
IaaS. It's just not consistent across WAP or Windows Azure Pack as we have it today and Azure. So this is a great move.
Yep.
But we haven't seen a lot. We haven't seen the full picture yet. So Azure Stack's a ways out. But it's exciting, and it's exciting, I think, to me for exactly the reasons that VMM was challenging.
Right.
To be transparent here, I've done some work with the Azure Resource Manager JSON templates, and I believe it's going to impress a lot of people. It's declarative. It enables us to deploy with greater parallelism, to run scripts more reliably, to start over when things don't go right the first time. So I can reapply that template and pick up where I left off in most circumstances. So that's a positive.
Absolutely.
That you can't take that down to the most granular element. If I write a crappy script and I use this JSON template to deploy my crappy script, if my script bombs in the middle somewhere, it's not the JSON, it's not the template methodology's deployment responsibility to fix my low-level problem there.
Right.
But I think with the native, with the declarative model there that allows us to define dependencies, with the support for PowerShell desired state configuration, this is going to be a fantastic leap in our deployment capability. And if we really wind up at the end of summer seeing a unified deployment capability across on-prem resources and
cloud
and Azure, this is a big deal.
It is.
And while there are a lot of people out there that are really, will defend Config Manager to the death and maybe secretly hope it never goes to the cloud and maybe hope that Ops Manager never goes to the cloud, I don't think you'll have as many defenders of VMM and certainly very few defenders of App Controller. So this is a spot where Microsoft needed to invest, and they're stepping up. So good for them.
Yeah, I think we can safely assume that at some point in the near future, App Controller will be deprecated. I think it had its time, but with the likes of Azure Stack, there's really no specific need for it.
Right, yeah. And so so App Controller hasn't been updated in a while, right? Microsoft's been very clear that they're not doing much there, and I don't think anyone will mourn the passing.
No, I thought so.
So be that neither here nor there.
Yeah. System Center, though. Let's talk, because we spent a little bit of time.
So getting back to the core, right?
Yep.
So where they did make some announcements. So with the Operations Management Suite, one of the other things that happened there is Azure Operational Insights is going to be kind of rolled into that.
Yes.
So it'll be part of that. So Azure Operational Insights, I've been excited about since they announced it last May of 2014 in Houston at TechEd, because that opens up some capabilities that were difficult to achieve on-prem with System Center, with Operations Manager. So they gave us a capability with Azure Operational Insights to connect to our Operations Manager management group and to pump data up there that could be used for capacity planning, for filtering through millions of event log events, for crunching alerts from Operations Manager.
Yep.
Backup data, we can manage Azure backup data now. There's SQL assessment, review and monitor Azure automation, change tracking across servers. I'm tired of naming here now. So, anti-malware status.
Yep.
So there's all sorts of capability here to take large data sets and to visualize those in dashboards automatically in Azure Operational Insights. So it makes a very appropriate addition to Operations Manager, in my opinion, because it meets a need that's difficult to achieve on-prem without a lot of work.
And there's no surprise that we're seeing some of the audit collection capabilities that you would get out of SCOM in Operational Insights. And I actually think that makes for a far better home for that data.
That's fair to say. So audit collection services was a nice idea.
Yep.
It was released with System Center 2007. That family. It wasn't significantly improved in 2012. They've made those bare minimum changes to support new operating systems, but the reporting is fairly rudimentary. If you would ask any proper audit, security audit professional.
Yep.
And really, when you looked at that solution at scale alongside other enterprise solutions, once you're investing in all that server infrastructure, audit collection services didn't make sense at scale.
No.
There were just too many challenges, and by the time we'd added up those dollars, it didn't make sense. So,
yeah, I mean, ACS was
a great move, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, I think, but
I think you're right about that. But yeah, so that's one that made a lot of sense. But and there's always room for improvements, but I think what we're seeing with Azure Operational Insights is promising. I won't say that those features that I was naming off are all really clean, because certainly they're not yet, and that security feature still needs some work for sure. So I'm hope we pop up in a year and we have another discussion and see where we are a year from now when those features are something much closer to fully cooked.
Yep.
But I think that's a great direction. I think Operations Manager is going to have a long life on-prem, and I think we're just going to see more and more capability to consume data and crunch that data and visualize in Azure.
Yep.
And I think we're going to see, as Microsoft have done, they've made it now easy for us to connect our servers we would like to manage to Azure Operational Insights and now OMS without the need for Operations Manager.
And I mean, the one thing I'd say is that, I mean, Ops Manager on-prem and Operational Insights, they complement each other. You know, Operational Insights provides additional capabilities that perhaps are there in SCOM but aren't as polished, aren't as good as what you'll get from Operational Insights. And the fact that the Microsoft are able to iterate through new versions of Operational Insights a lot faster than they're going to be able to do with an on-prem solution. And I see those two, and now the OMS and Operations Manager on-prem being far more integrated and leveraging those cloud-based features to enhance the capabilities of your on-prem solution.
Right. So I think the key word you mentioned there is complementary. So for all of these great things that Azure Operational Insights, OMS, does to enhance our investment in Operations Manager, it certainly doesn't come anywhere near replacing it, because we have all of that monitoring capability, the management packs, our investment in management packs from third parties.
Yep.
So we don't yet have the answer for how do those investments make their way into Azure, or do they make their way into Azure? You know,
right.
So the general theme we heard is we're going to help you, down the road when the time comes, get those investments into Azure. Mm-hmm. Although I don't want to say that there's detail all the way down to, oh yes, you're going to be able to pull your third-party management packs into Azure, because that's into OMS, because it's far too early for that promise, I think.
Yep.
But they have the concept of intelligence packs in Azure Operational Insights, and so that, no doubt with the announcement of OMS, that concept may evolve or change in name even, possibly. It's not, it's not a release product yet, so we'll see where it winds up. But yeah, I think the bottom line is, when we saw the Operations Management Suite announced, we saw that look of resignation on faces for folks who weren't, convinced that System Center was going to make it to make its way to the cloud.
Yep.
Everybody gets it now. There is no denying it. This is happening, folks. So,
I think a lot of people maybe thought, square peg, round hole, but I think Microsoft have been able to show that, there are, as a stepping stone, ways to have complementary products for your on-prem solutions, and then I think over time we'll see OMS start to build out to a fully contained solution that has the potential to replace something like SCOM. But there's going to be a need for SCOM into not just the near future, but also longer term, I think.
Well, sure, and there'll be a support statement that tells folks how long they can run Operations Manager on-prem.
Yep.
Well after, if assuming, and this is assuming, we're projecting into the future at this point now, saying that there's going to come a day where Operations Manager doesn't exist on-prem.
Yep.
And that's my assumption right now, but there's no proof of that until it actually happens.
And let's also state that there is going to be a System Center 2016, and that Microsoft will generally support any product for a period of up to 10 years for extended support. So we're talking 2026 before we potentially see the death of System Center.
Right. Yeah, that's.
And even then, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. So
specific announcements, because we have talked quite a bit about the cloud and some of the new offerings that Microsoft have announced there. What specifically did they talk about in regards to System Center on-prem? I know, again, you've already pointed out that Service Manager, there's very little.
Right.
Config Manager, I think the majority of people that listen to this podcast don't spend a great deal of time with Config Manager. That's not to say that they don't spend time with it, but what about SCOM? What about Orchestrator and some of the others, DPM, for instance?
Yeah, so if we just run down, so Microsoft actually has a a blog post on what they announced in System Center 2016 Technical Preview 2. So they announced software-defined data center in the software-defined data center management category, support for mixed mode cluster upgrades, some enhanced scale-out file server support and management, deployment of SDN at scale. So they're building some agility into the management stack in 2016 for on-prem.
Yep.
Desired state configuration support for Linux, native SSH support, improved LAMP stack monitoring across your non-Windows hosts, so to speak.
Yep.
We even saw a session or two with Orchestrator in the name, but let's be honest, Microsoft really isn't investing in Orchestrator. If I look at the updates that are rolling out to System Center 2012 R2, Orchestrator hadn't been touched in a while.
Yep.
The investments are in SMA. We saw a GUI experience, a GUI authoring experience for Azure Automation.
Yep.
So we'll see what comes for SMA. There was a commitment to provide a path for migrating your investments in Orchestrator
to SMA.
Right. And so there was a migration kit released in preview here recently, and I'm just going to pull that up. So there was a kit released, and I think I tweeted this probably last week, the System Center Orchestrator migration toolkit to Azure Automation and Service Management Automation. So it was published back in mid to late May. So there is a way for us to convert. This toolkit contains an integration pack converter. So basically, what it's going to do is take the integration packs that were created with the Orchestrator integration toolkit, and it'll convert those into integration modules based on Windows PowerShell. So let me just take a step back. So basically, what this tool assumes is that the integration pack was created with the Orchestrator integration toolkit to integrate modules based on Windows PowerShell it'll turn them into modules based on PowerShell that you can import into Azure Automation and Service Management Automation. So you use this wizard. You can select the activities that you want to convert into commandlets in the integration module, and you've got placeholders basically that are created for the activities that aren't going to be supported. So they're not promising they're going to come 100%.
Sure.
But they're going to let you pick the activities and run the wizard and see what comes.
So there's going to be an element of rebuild in that transition from Orchestrator to SMA in terms of the runbook, right?
Yeah, so if I'm saying it politely, hell yeah.
Yeah.
So all of us on planet Earth anyway have been using a lot of PowerShell. Whoops, my getting a little cloudy there again. We're using PowerShell in our Orchestrator runbooks. Which means that we're going to have some things that just plain probably won't convert, right? But I mean, it's PowerShell workflow, so you can, in PowerShell workflow, I can basically use an inline script tag and I can surround a PowerShell script. But there are going to be some points in there where, you're going to have to do some manual work, and if you've built some very complex run books, you might potentially have a lot of work.
Stick your hand in front of it. Get it to focus, and then move your hand. No, move. Stick your hand in front of it, and then move it backwards. And move it back, and back, and back. There we go. And he's back.
There's a ghost in the machine here, I tell you.
There is. After the show, what I'll get you to do is turn off the. There should be a feature within the webcam to do automatic focus. So if you turn that off.
Oh, okay. So we're auto-focusing is what's happening there.
Yeah, and for some unknown reason, it's focusing on something, not on you.
Gotcha.
So I don't know.
So So the other thing they mentioned, so you've got an integration pack converter.
Mm-hmm.
You have a standard activities module. So this module contains all of the standard activities that were used in Orchestrator runbooks. You can import that in, that can be imported into Azure Automation.
Yep.
So I'm thinking there are going to be a lot of PowerShell scripts in the world where we're going to have to maybe do a little bit of work, or potentially we might, architect those into runbooks of their own. Who knows? We'll have to cross that bridge as we come to it. Now, there was also a coming soon placeholder for a runbook converter that would basically take your Orchestrator runbooks, and can convert those into graphical runbooks that can be imported into Azure Automation.
Okay.
So we'll see, and we'll put the link to the migration toolkit in there. But it's promising, right? So I honestly, there was a point in time where I thought, Microsoft's not going to be able to do a heck of a lot to help us here. So this is already more than I was expecting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Microsoft, if you're taking us to a new platform, you need to.
The journey needs
you need to
easier.
protect our investments, because let's face it, they didn't buy Opalis all that long ago.
No.
And we only got one major release of Orchestrator, right? We got 2012.
Yep.
So they scrubbed the code, cleaned it up, gave us a proper, OData web service, gave us an R2 update, and now we're on to something else. So I think it's fitting that they are converting, giving us a migration path, because the other reality is if you go out in the field today, we're not seeing massive uptake on service management automation. When I talk to customers, when I see people in the community, Orchestrator is what they're talking about. It's what they're using, and it's no surprise. The promise of Orchestrator was more broadly supportable automation, because it wouldn't be in the hands of the few, which is why we'll see, greater uptake as that UI story around Azure Automation and presumably SMA, we'll see, evolves.
I think the Windows admin still has a preference and a penchant for a UI. I was at the Global Azure boot camp a month or so ago now, and one of the comments that one of the speakers got was, "You haven't convinced me that PowerShell is something that I should be using."
Oh my word!
Wow.
Oh my word! It's surprising, Dan. I have to say, I was in a group of about 40 the other day, and I asked how many of you are using PowerShell regularly, and I was expecting 75% of the room to raise their hand. 75% of the room did not raise their hand in this particular audience. There were very few consultants in the room. They're mostly corporate folk. But so it tells me, and it wasn't that they're not bought off on PowerShell. There were several people that said, "Yeah, man, I really need to dig in there and do something." So I don't think that those are people that are going to be left behind. I think those are people who are going to be faced with a pivotal moment where they realize they need to get on the stick and learn PowerShell, and they will or they won't. And there are a lot of talented System Center people who may not know a tremendous amount about PowerShell. I think those people are getting few in number, but I'm hopeful that there are some people that will be late to the party, but they'll get on board. And So one of the sessions that will help folks understand Azure Stack and Azure Resource Manager better is there was a session that Jeffrey Snover did on System Center futures.
Right.
So I'll put a link to that one in there. I say Jeffrey Snover. It was Jeffrey Snover, it was Mark Rusinovich, and Jeremy Winter. So they talked about some of the futures. So they drilled down into Azure Stack a bit. They drilled down into Azure Resource Manager. Like I said, though, you can see Azure Resource Manager in action in Microsoft Azure. And I find it very exciting and very smart what they're doing here. Let me just throw a little bug in the ear of our largely IT pro audience here. The best way to work with these Azure Resource Manager templates is Visual Studio.
Yes.
they've added visual. There's visualization in there. So if you load the Azure SDK version 2.6, it specifically adds this support, but you actually get a navigation pane down the left side of your Visual Studio console, where you can right-click and you can add some of the components. If I want to add a virtual machine, a network adapter, etc. I can do all of that. There are some components like load balancers that don't yet show up in that UI component.
Right.
But if you go back and listen to my interview with Corey Sanders from Ignite, I asked him. I mentioned specifically that I felt like Visual Studio was the best place to work on these, and are you going to make some investments, continue to make investments in that visualization? And he said, oh yeah, absolutely we are. So for me, I started doing a lot of my PowerShell scripting in Visual Studio like early last year.
Right.
And then I'm using that PowerShell module, that PowerShell add-in that you can get for free off of the TechNet gallery. And it's good enough for me. It has IntelliSense. I've got a pane where I can test things. So if you're not a follower, if you're a leader, if you're somebody that's going to be out there driving the bus, not riding on it, download Visual Studio and try Azure editing your Azure automation templates. I'll give you the 3 steps. You download. I'll give you. It's more than 3 steps. Sorry, I'm going to give you the steps though. Download Visual Studio, load the Azure 2.6 SDK for Visual Studio. That's going to give you that capability to work with these templates. Read the first 3 chapters of Pro Git, the free Git book, because all of these Azure Resource Manager templates are on Git, and just go out there and sync the repository. Dan, if you think there's enough interest in this, I will show people how to do this step by step because it's fantastic.
I think we can pencil this in as another netcast / tutorial.
We should. But bottom line, download these templates and start working with them, and that's fantastic. So Dan, I mentioned that we should show that operations management suite slide.
Yes.
I have it here, so let me share.
If you share your desktop.
Yeah, so we're making a big jump here in assuming that I actually know how to share my desktop.
So within Skype, you want to click the plus button.
The plus button.
Well, actually, I'm hovering over your video.
Yeah, there we go. I've got the plus button. Share
and
screens.
Then share screens.
And it's going to let me pick a screen. Fantastic.
Should.
I like it.
Flick over to full screen, Pete. Oh, look at this, folks. For those of you listening at home, check out the video. Go to youtube.com/user/Inside Podcast Network, and you'll get to see all these videos. We're doing videos now. Huzzah. That is... So
there you go. So right here, this tells us everything we need to know. So you want to know where VMM is headed or VMM functionality is headed? Meet Operations Management Suite. So one of those, there are a lot of complaints that we have today, right? When I work with VMM and I work with automation, I can't remember a time where working with a VMware client that I didn't oftentimes end up in a position where we had to go the route of working with Orchestrator and PowerShell and PowerCL and PowerCLI,
right? Because
there were limitations in VMM that prevented us from working with VMware directly. So now, with the Operations Management Suite, which includes the Azure Automation component, which is based on PowerShell workflow.
Yep.
I'm going to have as my target here on-prem VMware Azure Stack, which is going to include, Azure Stack is going to include Hyper-V as its fabric, right? Mm-hmm. Scale-out file server. You see OpenStack listed there, and then you see Amazon Web Services. So you see Microsoft is attempting to solve the problem of cloud lock. And they're already taking steps to do that. So if you haven't looked at Azure, at the Azure Site Recovery feature, I can and the migration capabilities, I can protect VMware guests very quickly, very easy, very effectively, and I can migrate workloads very quickly, very easy, very effectively. So this is going to happen, folks. I hope. I've high hopes that Microsoft's going to get this right. But when I saw this slide, it immediately gave me comfort that all of my interest and time spent in learning about and using Microsoft's investment in cloud in every way I could, whether it's Office 365 or Azure Ops Insights,
Yep.
or even back when it was System Center Advisor. Lord have mercy on my soul. This right here told me it's all coming together. So I'll stop sharing now, but I wanted to get that out there. That's where things are heading.
Yep.
Very, very soon. So
what are you doing? Stop sharing.
How do I stop sharing
Go
here?
back to
Let's
Skype.
see. And
Go back to Skype.
back to Skype. Stop sharing. Yeah, I couldn't
There
find
we
my
go.
Skype window, frankly. So
There we go. That's all right.
done. So that's the big picture right there, folks. So if you want to talk about the future of System Center, it's going to be very heavily influenced by the contents of that slide.
Yep.
We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but it's going to be a big evolution, and it's going to be very exciting. So
I think the key word there is exciting. I'm certainly excited about not just the announcements, but all of the new capabilities that Microsoft are introducing into Azure. There's some really cool stuff there.
Yeah. So to me, it definitely feels like the deployment capability and the management capability and our ability to secure Azure
Yep.
has grown up. It's advancing very, very quickly now. And when we look at the Enterprise Mobility Suite and the identity components within there,
Yep.
which you talked about with Wes last week on the Inside the Microsoft Cloud podcast,
Yep.
it's evolving very, very quickly. It's impressive.
It is. I was going to say something, and as per usual, it's
So you
evacuated
notice
my
every
mind.
time you try to send me back to System Center, we wind up talking about cloud because the two are just intertwined at
Yep.
this point, and it's where the future is going to be. So that OMS component is still listed as complementing your System Center investment. And I think that's going to be true for a long, long time.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, if your organization wants to eliminate cloud lock and you want to leverage VMware and potentially Hyper-V and not abandon what you've done in Amazon, but start investing or investing more in Azure as it begins to kick Amazon's butt, which I think is going to happen, frankly.
Yep.
Especially after we saw that little note a few months ago where Amazon had to write down a bunch of infrastructure.
What I think is interesting, though, is that Microsoft are making a play in terms of streamlining and simplifying the process of moving workloads from AWS into Azure. They've got a few tools in preview at the moment that will allow you to migrate a virtual machine through various processes from AWS into Azure. But
Right.
Interestingly, the tool isn't limited in its functionality. You can also migrate virtual machines from Azure into AWS, or from on-prem into Azure, or from on-prem into AWS. It's a tool that at least I can't see any limitations on it in terms of that migration piece, because you install the tool within the functional virtual machine, within the operating system. And it does block level replication over to another virtual machine, thus pulling essentially every single piece of data within that VMDK or within that virtual disk over to the new machine. I think this is a great thing, because I know a lot of organisations who have a policy of not putting all their eggs in one basket, and they don't want to go with a single provider. So the ability to have replication between Azure and AWS is a great thing.
Right, right, yeah. So that's and I've seen partners out there in more in the PaaS space who have already integrated and have connected an Amazon cloud to an Azure sub, and the ways they were doing that was pretty ugly.
Yep.
So yeah, that's all going to be a thing of the past, and we're seeing the on-prem connectivity to Azure with ExpressRoute, and even those components are evolving. So
yep.
It's all going to get easy. So I think the end of cloud lock. Without you can overcome cloud lock to some degree, to your point, by investing in the right third-party components. Now we're going to see a major cloud provider.
Yep.
Because if we look at the cloud providers that are capable of achieving hyperscale, you have Azure, you have Amazon, and Google will fall in there. If they don't fall in there today, they'll fall in there eventually, right? So Google obviously achieves hyperscale with their own infrastructure. And I fully expect Facebook to join the fray at some point and start offering, something of this nature.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. Well, Facebook, like many of them, have been building their own, designing and building their own servers for a long, long time, right? Yep. So they've got a highly specialized, highly scalable back end. So we'll see where it all evolves. That's a story for another time. We're coming up on about 45 minutes.
Yep.
And I think the summary here is that the System Center 2016 announcements were light. We've seen some slight improvements. Most of the concentration around the LAMP stack and Ops Manager. Yep. The Fabric announcements. The control plane is all about OMS and Azure Stack at this point. So that's kind of a future capability at this point because we don't have a usable version of Azure Stack yet.
Yep.
You can go try OMS such as it is today in its current state,
yep.
If you like. Config Manager for you deployment gurus is Windows 10 friendly, and we'll see another drop there, no doubt, for server around the end of the year, as I mentioned. So
yep, that may have been in our first recording. I can't remember now.
Yeah, and there we have it. So
there indeed. What was that?
That was my...
Oh, that was... Okay. Fair enough. Right, as we come to a close, let us go through the usual. Tell the good folks how the people can find you, Pete.
I can be found lurking on Twitter at PZERGER, and blogging these days at InsideTheMicrosoftCloud.com.
There we go. You can jump on over to ipn.tv for all the latest episodes and show notes. We have the video and audio available up on the website. For those of you who are so inclined and wish to help a brother out, as they say, jump on over to patreon.com/IPN and feel free to donate. All your donations will go to running this fine establishment of ours and helping to pay our costs. So that was Patreon, patreon.com/IPN. Donations for as little as $1 a month will see a small Pete in Houston not starve. So give generously.
There we go.
You can follow us on Twitter at Inside Podcast. Feel free to send your tweets, if you have any, use the hashtag for this particular podcast, Inside, what are we going to go with? Hashtag Inside System Center. Why not?
There you go.
And we will read out your tweets on air, or if you have a question, send it through using that hashtag, and we'll make sure that we cover that off in the next episode of the podcast. Netcast. Need to get used to saying that. You can follow me at Dan Kreger, DANKREGOR, on Twitter. For now, though, Pete, I think we can call episode 1 of Inside System Center done.
Done
So-
indeed, and for those of you that are interested in a little more visualization around, System Center to OMS, I'll put a pointer in the show notes to those slides. I'll probably just screenshot a couple of these slides so you've got it at a glance. But Dan, I'm excited. Thanks for getting us off the ground.
Thank you, Pete, and everyone, stay tuned. We at this stage will be cycling through weekly in terms of inside the Microsoft Cloud and inside System Center. So 1 week will be cloud and the next week will be on-prem. So stay tuned for another episode. Head to youtube.com/user/Inside Podcast Network to catch up on all of our previous episodes and some of the ad hocs. Pete and Lee Berg did a great sit down with Corey Sanders and the scripting guy, Ed Wilson, as well. So some great videos up there already, and we'll be bringing you more in the future. As for right now, this has been episode 1 of Inside System Center. Thank you all for listening and or watching, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Cheers.